identity politics, and that's why you like Tulsi. You made an identity politics argument based on your identity, which strikes me as a contradiction of sorts. That was weird to me.
There's the support of politics based on someone's identity and the support of opposition to that, right?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a fascinating debate between David Pakman and Tim Pool that gets right to the heart of something we see all the time in political media. The gap between what creators claim they are versus what their content actually shows. David comes with receipts, pulling up Tim's actual video titles and percentages, and what follows is one of the most revealing conversations about political positioning, identity politics, and audience capture you'll see. This gets into some real contradictions that I think a lot of you are going to find eye-opening. Make sure you watch until the end. Please comment down where you are watching from. It's great to see people from over the world connecting in here. All right, now let's get into the video.
2 to 5% of your channel is criticizing Trump. I just took a glance at it before we went live. 85% of it seems to be criticizing not just Democrats, but the left. So I want to hear you defend your position that you are center left, because like if somebody looks at my channel, it's obvious that I'm on the left and I'm a progressive. If you look at just my last 10 videos, my last 20 videos, my last 100 videos, whatever. When I pulled up your channel, I see Republicans push laws to end censorship, pro-Republican story. Facebook's purge of the right has begun.
Is that pro-Republican?
I think it is. I mean, well, so let me get to that in a second. Let me explain. Yeah. So I'll conservative news added to blacklist. Conservatives are the victims. Leftist activists, not establishment Dems, but leftist activists force MasterCard to vote on banning the far right. The far right is the victim. Antifa planned armed disruption of U.S. border. It's the left that's causing violent chaos at the border. Censorship backfires on far left. Of course, far left is not establishment Dems. Another hate crime hoax exposed. That's, I mean, the hate crime, that's less politically, overtly political. Mueller report provides media, proves media is a fake news trash fire. Mostly a story being parroted by the right, although there are enclaves on the left that are saying that. So my view, Tim, is, and you know we've known each other for years, and this is not, this is just my assessment of what's on your channel, that about 85% of your content is going after the left. And I totally get criticizing the left from the left. Like I do that as well. But the overall selection is selection of stories that to me seems as painting the right in a good light or as the victims, and choosing to go after relatively insignificant enclaves of the left. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, no, the way you see it is the way a lot of people see it. And I think you have your opinion, your view. I'll psychoanalyze myself for a second. And I think for me, I was kind of, growing up kind of ostracized by a lot of the establishment and main left, but more specifically, again, to psychoanalyze myself, I've gone through a period where all of the attacks I receive and everything that tries to ruin my life is coming from this one group of left-wing individuals for a specific purpose. And that's naturally going to result in certain behaviors and certain focuses. So let's actually, I don't want to make that seem like a cop-out. I've been physically attacked by the left, not the right. People are right now taking a quote from Vox.com to make it seem like I am an anti-Semite so they can get me removed from my bank account and stuff. That's not coming from conservatives. It never has.
That's fair. That's totally fair. But I guess what's important to me...
I will go through these videos, though. I will. So forgive me.
And I actually don't need you to do an accounting of each video. For me, it's more, if I look at your channel and 85% is criticisms that are what I would consider relatively niche in terms of their existence on the left. It doesn't strike me as someone whose priorities are center left to say, here's what I think 85% of my channel should be.
But here's the thing. Tulsi Gabbard denounced identity politics outright with Michael Tracy. She said straight up, it's divisive, it's bad for us.
Okay.
Identitarianism is one of the biggest things that I have a problem with due to my family history being, I know it's kind of a meme, but mixed. And this comes from, when we look at affirmative action...
But Tim, isn't that identity politics? You're saying your view on this is informed, you're against identity politics as informed by your identity.
Yeah, it is what it is. I'll put it this way. I am not permitted, the left nor the right allow me an identity. So what that does is it kind of ostracizes me. And what I find recluse, not recluse, but what I find safe harbor, I guess, is the fact that the U.S. actually had protections against discrimination based on race in these things. So for me, someone who's experienced it from both directions, I'm apprehensive towards either direction. When I have the left telling me I'm a white male and the right telling me I'm a mudblood, like I'm not going to be happy with
Fine,
either
but Tim,
group.
so I have the left saying I'm not Jewish, I'm white, and I have white privilege, and I have the right saying I'm not white, I'm Jewish, and Jews are a race that is really bad, and we should be really. So the fact that
I hear you.
but that doesn't make
Okay, this is what I'm talking about. David just pulled receipts, and Tim's defense is, well, I got attacked by the left, so that's why my channel is 85% anti-left content. Listen, I get it. Getting attacked sucks. Having your livelihood threatened? Absolutely terrifying. But here's what bothers me about this response. You can't claim to be center-left when your content output directly contradicts that position. David did the work. He looked at the actual videos, and what did he find? Republicans push laws to end censorship. Conservatives are the victims. Leftist activists force MasterCard. Antifa planned armed disruption. Every single title frames the right as victims and the left as aggressors. That's not center-left analysis. That's right-wing framing with a center-left aesthetic. And Tim's justification? Personal grievances. Look, I'm not minimizing what he's been through, but you cannot let personal beef dictate 85% of your political commentary and then claim neutrality. That's like saying, I'm a vegetarian, but I eat meat 85% of the time because a vegan was mean to me once. The math doesn't math. Here's what David is really asking. Where's the proportional criticism? If you're center-left, where are the videos critiquing conservative policy? Where's the coverage of Republican corruption? Where's the pushback on actual right-wing authoritarianism? Because focusing on leftist activists and hate crime hoaxes while ignoring the massive institutional power imbalances on the right? That's a choice, and that choice reveals your priorities. Tim says, subject matter doesn't dictate politics, but yes, it does when you're a political commentator. Your curation matters. What you choose to amplify, what you choose to ignore, that is your politics in action. You can't hide behind, I'm just covering what I find important, when what you find important aligns 85% with right-wing grievance narratives. David's being generous here by even engaging with this defense. Because the reality is simpler than Tim wants to admit. His audience is right-wing, his revenue comes from that audience, and his content reflects what that audience wants to hear. That's not center-left. That's business. And there's nothing wrong with that, but own it. Don't gaslight your viewers by claiming a political position your content clearly doesn't support. The I've been attacked by the left defense is the shield every right-wing grifter uses to justify their rightward drift. I didn't leave the left left me. No, Tim. You chose your content strategy based on what gets views and what keeps you safe from demonetization, which again, fine. But don't pretend it's principled political positioning when it's algorithmic survival.
make me all of a sudden say, I'm going to do 85% of my videos and criticize the left. You know what I mean?
No, I think it's what you personally find important, right? You know, if you watch any of my videos, like, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Subject matter doesn't dictate politics simply because you've got, you know, who's, and again, it's my opinion, but
Sure.
when I say who's trying to remove people from the internet, it's not like Nancy Pelosi. It's a particular sect of a group of progressive, more far left individuals who's trying to get people removed from their banks, who's trying to get people banned, who's arguing in favor of regulation that restricts speech. It's not conservatives and it's not moderate Democrats.
Okay, but a lot
And
of
so
your
that
stories don't
freaks me
relate
out.
specifically to that issue. But let's not belabor it. I do find it sort of interesting, though, that in the same sentence that you said you're against identity politics and that's why you like Tulsi, you made an identity politics argument based on your identity, which strikes me as a contradiction of sorts. That was weird to me.
There's the support of politics based on someone's identity and the support of opposition to that, right? I don't. And let me make clear, some identity politics are absolutely a good thing. It's identitarianism that's a bad thing. So
Okay.
maybe that's. So I tell people this: authority is a good thing. Like when a doctor tells you, "Hey, there's someone injured. Put your hand on the wound." That's true authority. You'll just do it. You know they're right.
Okay.
But authoritarianism is a really, really bad thing. So telling someone in our society you cannot factor in race in terms of public accommodation, that's a violation of civil rights. I like that. When you say we're absolutely going to factor in race, I don't like that. So it's nuanced, I guess, right?
And does anyone who's saying that we have to factor in race when it's not a relevant factor?
The ACLU, when they supported affirmative action at Harvard, which lumps all Asians, Indian, Chinese, Laotians into one category, and I find that offensive as an Asian person. And so when I come out and say,
but Tim, that's an identity to say you should be able to argue whether it's offensive or not offensive, right or not right, without saying because you are part Asian, you find like that's identity politics, which you claim to be against.
I agree. And I think the clarification then, I think what we're discovering here is that it's not so much the core idea of identity politics, it's the application of in ways that either is reductive or authoritarian. So let me frame it this way. The civil rights movement, paramount, 100% important. It's the only reason my family was able to live in this country without threat of law, because miscegenation laws made it illegal for my family to live together. It was identity politics that ended that. But that was the end of identitarianism, where they actually said this for this race, this for that race. And so we implemented laws that said you can't do X based on these characteristics. I like that. It's not perfect. But now we're seeing, particularly, again, I think it's Harvard, where there's this really common idea of all race is one thing. And that's just not true, right? So
But that's totally separate from identity politics.
So I think we're clarifying the issue in that case then,
okay.
Right? So if I think to reduce it to simple identity politics is more of a tribal signifier. Like if I say to certain people identity politics, they nod and they understand. And I think what you're bringing up, it's actually really important because we're seeing how language kind of divides us more.
Well, but I didn't bring it up. All I'm bringing up is that twice now you're in the context of saying you're against identity politics, you brought up your identity as the basis for why you feel the way you do, which seems to me like identity politics.
And so I guess to clarify, I think it's wrong to judge people based on the color of their...
Wait. Did Tim just make an identity politics argument while claiming to be against identity politics? David caught this immediately, and I'm losing my mind because this is the exact hypocrisy that drives me crazy about these conversations. Tim says he likes Tulsi Gabbard because she's against identity politics. Cool. Then immediately says, due to my family history being mixed, that's identity politics? He's using his identity as a mixed race person to justify his political position on identitarianism. David's calling this out in real time and Tim's trying to dance around it, but there's no dance here. You either think identity matters in political discourse or you don't. Here's the thing about the I'm not allowed an identity by either side argument. That's still engaging with identity as your framework. Saying the left calls me white, the right calls me Jewish, so I reject identitarianism is still centering identity in your worldview. You're just positioning yourself as the victim of identity politics rather than acknowledging that everyone navigates identity in political spaces. And then Tim tries to pivot to affirmative action and Harvard, which David handles brilliantly by pointing out, you're making an identity politics argument based on your identity while claiming to be against identity politics. Like, the cognitive dissonance is astronomical here. You can't say, as an Asian person, I find affirmative action offensive, and then claim you oppose identity-based arguments. That's an identity-based argument. The whole I experience discrimination from both directions thing? Valid personal experience. But using that experience to justify a blanket opposition to all forms of identity-conscious policy? That's reductive. The Civil Rights Act that Tim claims to support? That was identity politics. It specifically protected people based on race, religion, national origin, because those identities were being systematically discriminated against. David's patience here is commendable because I would have lost it when Tim said, identity politics are good, but identitarianism is bad, as if that distinction means anything in this context. It's semantic gymnastics to avoid admitting that all political advocacy involves identity to some degree. The question isn't whether identity matters, it's how we account for identity in policy without being reductive or discriminatory. Tim keeps bringing up the judge people by content of character, not color of skin. MLK quote, which is fine, but he's weaponizing it to argue against any race-conscious policy. That's not what King meant. King supported affirmative action. He understood that colorblindness in an unequal society just perpetuates existing hierarchies. You can't ignore race when race has been used as a tool of oppression for centuries. The wealthy Indian immigrant example Tim uses? Classic right-wing framing. Look, a rich minority exists. Therefore, systemic racism isn't real. Individual exceptions don't disprove systemic patterns, and using those exceptions to argue against policies designed to address historical inequities. That's not principled opposition to identitarianism. That's just opposition to redistribution with extra steps. David's trying to keep this conversation on track, but Tim keeps spiraling into these defensive tangents, where he's simultaneously claiming identity doesn't matter, while centering his own identity in every argument. You can't have it both ways, Tim.
Skin, and we should judge them based on the content of their character.
Okay.
So to me, to my interpretation of identitarianism, based on its root definition as identity-based government, would be the government saying this for this race, that for that race. That to me is wrong.
Okay.
So when you see like certain groups advocating that we should factor in race for college admissions, I think that's wrong. I think we should judge individuals based on who they are, and one of the reasons for this is that it doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, trans, or whatever. You can be rich or poor. And if we start acting like the true signifier of someone's capabilities or someone's privilege is what color their skin is, that's when things are devolving into overt racism, because you're going to have particularly wealthy, say Indians, millionaire, high caste individuals who come to America and claim that the middle class working family who's white has more power than they do. And this argument starts getting, it's dangerous.
Yeah, well,
we want to take care of the poor.
We can find counter examples where the more prominent historical narratives aren't true, but I think we need something stronger to make a sort of broader indictment of what policy might be. But because we're kind of now getting into what we were originally going to talk about, so let's explore part one of censorship and discrimination, etc. There are identity elements that are protected classes under the law. Some of them are protected under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So I believe, going from memory, race is protected under the 64 Civil Rights Act. I believe nationality comes from the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and some others. There are others, like, for example, age. Age is a protected class.
Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. Tim finally articulates a clearer position. He's against race-based government policy, but supports anti-discrimination law. That's at least coherent. But David's pivot here is crucial because he's about to tie this back to the censorship conversation, and I already know where this is going. Here's what's interesting about Tim's clarification. He draws a line between identity politics, protecting people from discrimination, and identitarianism, factoring race into decision-making. That distinction actually matters. But the problem is Tim's been using these terms interchangeably throughout the conversation, which is why David kept catching him in contradictions. The college admissions debate is where this actually gets complicated, and I think both of them know it. Because affirmative action isn't just this for this race, that for that race. It's attempting to correct for systemic barriers that disproportionately affect certain groups. Tim frames it as judging by skin color, but that's not the intent. The intent is acknowledging that opportunity isn't equally distributed and trying to level the playing field. But here's what frustrates me about Tim's position. He keeps citing edge cases, wealthy high caste Indians, to argue against policies designed to address broad patterns of inequality. Yes, class matters. Yes, wealthy minorities exist. But that doesn't negate the statistical reality that race correlates with access to resources, quality education, generational wealth, and opportunity in America. You can acknowledge both things simultaneously. David's trying to steer this toward the censorship conversation because that's where the real meat of this debate lives. Protected classes, discrimination law, and how that applies to online platforms, that's the conversation that matters for content creators like Tim. And notice how David's being strategic here. He's letting Tim clarify his position before pressing him on the logical implications. The transition David makes about protected classes under the Civil Rights Act is setting up his next argument. I can feel it coming. He's about to argue that if certain characteristics are legally protected from discrimination in employment and public accommodation, then the question becomes, do online platforms have similar obligations? And if conservatives argue they're being censored for their beliefs rather than their protected characteristics, does that change the equation? This is where Tim's argument is going to get tested. Because if he's arguing that race-based considerations are wrong in college admissions, but political viewpoint discrimination is wrong in online moderation, he's going to have to explain why one form of characteristic-based treatment is acceptable and the other isn't. Political affiliation isn't a protected class in most contexts, so what's the legal or moral framework for treating it as if it should be? So what do you think of this? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.